All right, we're doing it. Hey, Kelly.
Hello. Hi.
How's it going?
Good. I'm so excited.
Awesome. So we have Kelee Bovelle here. So Kelly was actually one of the very first people that I talked to when I like had this idea that I wanted to like maybe talk to some other like wedding industry people, photographers, planners, that sort of thing. Um, and Kelly was actually really helpful in just being like a sounding board to talk to and kind of like bounce ideas off of. So yeah, I'm stoked you're here, and
Yay, me too.
I'm gonna let you take it away for a second.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's so sweet. I'm Kelly. I am a freelance creative. So I am definitely a multi-hyphenate. I am a photographer, which is how I know Mike. And I also have a podcast that I pretty much do everything for, from the studio to the production, the writing, the editing, everything. And that takes up most of my time right now, actually. But I also love making vlogs on YouTube and just all different types of content creation. And just I've been loving producing and directing things recently. So that's another passion of mine.
What's the
So
name of
yeah,
your podcast?
my podcast is called Stop the Internet. It is just for entertainment. It not just for entertainment, but I hate using that word just because I feel like that's such a it kind of diminishes things sometimes and you're like, it's
Yeah,
just this
yeah.
little thing.
Don't minimize it.
Yeah. So it is for entertainment, but sometimes I think when I introduce myself as a photographer or a professional in the creative space, then people are like, oh, they kind of think that the podcast is going to be about that as well. But the podcast is for entertainment and it focuses on stories, conversations, and advice. So every week we have a different kind of broad topic and then we read stories and personal life situations and we give our opinions, we talk about it, we sometimes give advice, and it's really, really conversation based and just about all different things in life. A lot of like relationships, friendships, personal stories, things like that.
So I have to tell you, I caught a clip of your Taylor Swift lyrics episode, and you said something that made me think about how old I'm getting.
Oh no.
Well, no, you said that like I think you said you were horrified for the day where
Oh
like
no.
you're like listening to the radio and some radio station is like, "All right, let's play some like Taylor Swift," and then they put on like "Shake It Off" or something like that. Because I mean, you're clearly a very like devoted, hardcore like Taylor Swift fan. Um, I mean, she's fine. I like her. She's great. She's good. Um, but it made me think about the first time that I heard like Red Hot Chili Peppers
Oh
on the
yeah.
classic rock station,
Oh my
or like,
gosh.
and I was like, or like Green Day, and I was like, oh my god, I'm old now. I don't like this.
I know. I actually that episode or that clip got a lot of hate from Swifties who love Shake It Off. I see where they're coming from. Basically, people were saying that Shake It Off is an iconic song and it deserves to be on the radio. And I agree. I agree that it is iconic, but I think it's not her best by far. And I'm even scared to say that now because of how strongly other people felt about it. I don't want to offend someone and I don't want to say that it's a bad song, but I hope that other songs are also remembered for Taylor's legacy. But yeah, that is so funny. And when you said they were on classic rock radio, was that the description of the radio station was actually classic rock?
Yeah, yeah. It
Oh
was.
my God.
I grew up in New York, so I grew up listening to like Q 1043, and like when I was a kid, it was always like, the Doors or like Led Zeppelin or
Hmm.
like the Beatles. So like in my mind, like that was a definition of like an oldie. And then, like when I was in high school, like listened to a lot of like Red Hot Chili Peppers, like Weezer, Green Day, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, like all that kind of stuff. And so I remember pretty vividly, like maybe after college or like maybe shortly thereafter when I was in like my late 20s, starting to hear those songs on the radio as like classic rock
Yeah.
and just feeling horrified. Um, but like, I think I said this on the last episode too. Like, I'm pushing 40 now, and so like I really am starting to feel like I'm like seeing the generational shift, or
Hmm.
like feel the generational shift. Um, I mean, I don't know about you. Like, I think you're like what? You're like a couple years younger than me, I think.
I'm
Um,
28.
28. Wow, you're
Yeah.
like okay. So anyway, so have you started to feel that? Like, do you consider yourself a millennial, or do you identify more like Gen Z?
I've seen people call the break off point at different years, but I was born in 96 and I've seen on certain websites that people consider 96 the cutoff. But it's like the cutoff for what? I don't know. I will say this, I have always related more to Gen Z than I have to millennials, even when I was in high school and college. And it's like anything that's a millennial trope right now, I feel like I never related to it. Like a good example would be Harry Potter. A lot of people make fun of millennials for Harry Potter, which I would never do. I tried my hardest to like Harry Potter and I do like it. It just was never like this overwhelming passion of mine. I couldn't relate to the people that it was like their everything.
Mm,
I love Twilight and I feel like that's a Gen Z thing, even though it came out so much earlier than Gen Z would have been when Gen Z would have been the core audience. And just Gen Z humor on TikTok and social media is my sense of humor. So I definitely relate more to that. But I do see there is this category of humor and just discourse that is more related to like younger Gen Z, like if they're in high school and college now, that sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't, like, even like children are
mm,
relating to that kind of stuff. And I'm like, some of it is not for me, but as a whole, I do relate to Gen Z content and humor more than I
okay.
relate to millennial stuff.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So I kind of fall into the category of like an older millennial.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if you've ever watched that Eliza Schlesinger, one of her stand-up specials was called Elder Millennial. And so I feel
Okay.
like that's kind of like the category that I would put myself in. But that's funny because I had this like, and I think we've talked about this too. Like, I had this image of you being older than you actually are. And I think it's because like, I don't know, you just have this like maturity
Oh.
about you that like you carry yourself in a very mature way, and it's maybe because I see you on like wedding days and like you're like HBIC, like kicking ass and like on top of things. So actually, so that kind of brings me back to one of the things I wanted to ask you. Although I love the talk of oldies and Harry Potter and
Yeah.
Taylor Swift, we can get back into that. I wanted to One of the questions that I am curious to ask like all the people that I have on here is like, what was the series of events that kind of wound you up getting into photography, wedding photography specifically? It sounds like, you know, you're kind of like me in a couple ways where like my interests are like many and varied. Kind of like, you sound like a little bit of a Renaissance woman. Like, but what were you doing or what were you thinking like maybe like later in high school or like in college? Like, what did you think your career path was going to be? And I don't even like the word career path. Like, what did you think, what was your perception of like ways to support yourself? And then like what wound up actually happening?
Yeah, growing up, especially in high school and early college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. There wasn't just this one thing that I could put my finger on, like doctor, you know, scientist. I was like, I have no clue what I want to do. Although I was always creative throughout my entire life, I've always been into art in all sorts of mediums. I've explored so many different types of art. And I've always been drawn to photography and videography. Like, even as a kid, I was begging my dad to let me film like the ducks at Disney World. So, from a very early age, I was drawn to photography and just capturing things. And then in high school and college, I loved doing photo shoots with my friends. And I think that I just thought that everyone did that, like just going out into a field of like tall grass and like posing, like just capturing portraits and stuff of my friends. I've always loved doing that. I don't know if everyone did that, even though I kind of thought that was just like a normal thing to do at the time. So looking back on those moments, I feel like that was kind of a sign that I was always passionate about photography. And then going into college, I actually applied to the business school at Temple University, where I went to college. And I was going to do that because I've always had this love for business. But something was like, it just doesn't feel exactly right to me. It feels like it would have no creativity involved, and I would just feel like a little bit out of place there. So instead of starting off taking business classes, I just changed my major to undecided so I could get all of my gen eds out of the way. And I kind of wish I did stay in the business school or at least did like a minor in it because it would have helped me now. But still had no idea what I wanted to do. I did not know that being a photographer was even an option as like a job. It just like never crossed my mind. I didn't know anyone that was a professional photographer. My parents have had very normal jobs. All of my aunts and uncles, all of my friends' parents, normal job, go to an office building, 9 to 5, go home. Like I didn't even know that half the jobs on like in the world were possible. And then I ended up majoring in advertising, which I loved. I thought it was so much fun. And while I was in college, I just started liking photography more. And I really got into surf photography. I went to Hawaii in college and I was on the North Shore with my camera. And I was so obsessed with surfing. It was like my biggest passion, even though I'm terrible at surfing, but just the whole culture, watching it, talking about it, following surfing the way that a lot of people follow football and basketball. I could name every pro surfer. Like that was like my passion. And taking photos of the surfers in the winter on the North Shore, surfing in the biggest waves in the world, the most iconic wave in the world. I loved it. And then I actually connected with one of our colleagues, Maggie, who runs the studio that Mike and I were connected through. And she kind of guided me. I randomly reached out to her on Instagram and I was like, wait, how are you from the East Coast, but you're a surf photographer? She was also a surf photographer, if you don't know her. And she kind of like guided me and gave me some advice. And so I really took, or I really just followed the path of surf photography. And then after a few years, when I was getting to the end of college, I was like, okay, well, surf photographers do not make any money at all. Like it is so competitive. Everyone wants to be a surf photographer. I mean, it's the coolest job ever, right? So, um, I was like, I probably have to do something else in addition to doing this for fun. So I started just shooting for brands, like reaching out to random brands and bringing the products like on vacation with me and taking pictures of them in like tropical places. And then I don't even know how it came to me. I got the idea of reaching out to a wedding photographer, and I happened to see a wedding photographer pop up on my Explore page in New Jersey. And she basically was like, I'm growing my team. Reach out to me if you are interested in being a wedding photographer. And I remember like willy nilly reaching out to her. I would probably be so embarrassed of the email that I sent to her now, but just because it sounded probably so unprofessional and like immature. But she responded to me and she's like, yeah, let's talk. And I want to hear about your goals. And I was like, oh, goals. Like, I don't have goals in photography. Like, what does it even mean? And she turned out to be one of the most incredible photographers that I've ever met. And I started working with her and we hit it off as like colleagues and friends. And she just has her business like down to a T and she's amazing. Her name's Jessa, and she kind of took me under her wing and like trained me. And then I just started shooting with her in the wedding space. And then I mentioned Maggie earlier. I started shooting with her. And I guess while all this was happening, sorry, I'm like so detailed in my
No,
story.
this is great. This is great.
Okay. Um, I majored in advertising, so I'll just jump back to senior year of college. I got an internship at Urban, which is the parent brand that owns Anthropology, Terrain, Urban Outfitters, Free People. And at the time it was called Beholden, but now it's called Anthropology Weddings. I got an internship at Beholden doing social media. So I was experiencing like a social media corporate job And they were really amazing to me. They really wanted to help my photography interest blossom and also use it to their advantage too. So I just jumped in, and as an intern, I was like shooting Instagram content, but then it just kind of like kept growing and growing. And I was shooting like, we were planning these whole brand shoots at like a local winery. I remember we did one, and we got all these local like influencers to come and model the bridesmaids dresses, and I shot the whole thing, and it was like on their Instagram. I forgot, probably on their website too. And that was a really cool experience because I got to see it from both sides, and I got to see how a corporate wedding brand worked. And then at the same time, it was senior year when I first reached out to Jessa and when we first connected. And the first time I shadowed her at a wedding was when I was a senior in college. So I was seeing it from both sides, which was really cool. And then when it got to the end of my senior year and my internship was ending, they basically, how they work is you get an intern and then that person leaves and the intern takes their job. And I was like, I don't want to take this full-time job, even though I love working here. I feel like I'm meant to do something more, something in the photography space, in the wedding industry. So it was actually really unconventional what I ended up doing, but I ended up staying at Beholden part-time because the social media manager did leave, and I would have taken their job, but I just didn't want to. And my manager kind of like worked with me, and they were just like very slow to hire a new full-time social media manager. So I kind of just like did the job in the meantime, and I was like running the Instagram while also doing wedding photography and being a freelancer. So that was cool. And then I forget exactly how long I stayed doing that. I think maybe a year and a half after, or maybe a year after I graduated, probably a little bit more than that. But anyway, then I just kept shooting more and more weddings, working my way up to lead shooting. And then at the same time, I was still shooting a lot of brands. So that was also a kind of an unconventional way to shoot for brands at the time. Now it's like way more accepted. This was in 2018, 2019, and even like the beginning of 2020. But basically, I was reaching out to brands that had products like bathing suits, beach hats, like I forgot, sunscreen, like all of those kinds of products that you would just throw in your beach bag. I would reach out to those companies and I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go to, or I'll be in Hawaii or I'll be in Florida with all these like palm trees and beautiful backgrounds. I want to bring your product with me and shoot it there. And you can have all the photos to use on your whatever, digital, anything. And at the time, I don't think that was conventional, like I said. So it was very confusing to a lot of brands. Like people would respond to me. I would send them this entire deck or like my website where it was like commercial photography, like art direction, all in one. And people would be like, oh, we don't have budget for influencers. And I'm like, ugh, I'm not an influencer. I am an art director, a photographer, a production agency, all in one. And all you have to do is mail me the product, and I will do everything else. And you'll have perfect brand images that some companies are spending like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get because they're hiring a photographer there, a marketing agency there, an art director there, a production company there. And I'm like, I'll just do it all in one. Um, so that was like kind of a struggle to actually get clients, but at the same time, it was really, really fun because shooting that stuff is just so much fun. Like just like walking on the beach or like down a boardwalk or like a promenade with palm trees all around you and just like shooting a beach hat or something. I just actually stumbled upon the photos that I shot for a hat company on my spring break of college, and I'm like still obsessed with them. I looked at them like, damn, these were so cool. Like it's just, and it's so fun that I got to shoot that. I think I did like I started out doing it for free though, or just like give me the
Hmm.
product and I'll shoot the photos for free. And I was
So,
definitely doing too much. Like I was giving them way too much
hmm.
for a free trade, but it's the beginning of your career, so like what are you gonna do? And then
So hold
kind of
on.
yeah, okay.
Can I interject for a second?
Yes,
Because
of course.
there's like a couple things you said,
Okay.
and um, I don't want to forget.
Okay.
So the first thing, so I can't believe we haven't talked about this. I didn't know
I know.
you didn't surf did surf photography in Hawaii. Did you live in Hawaii?
No, so
You-
I visited out on a vacation with my parents
Okay.
when I graduated high school, and I was like, "Oh my God, I love it here. Like this is a dream." And when I was a sophomore in college, my friend and I went for 2 weeks over Chris or winter break,
Okay.
and
So
I
you were
loved
there
it.
like during like prime time, like swell season, like
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't start off doing surf photography, but for about like 3 or 4 years, I was like deep into like going to all the different spots around New Jersey and
Wow. Wait,
yeah,
shooting or surfing?
shooting. Yeah,
Oh,
not
wow.
I've gone surfing 3 times
Okay.
and like have gotten up on the board for like maybe half a second.
Okay.
So, but no, I like would wake up, ass crack of dawn. I'd read the surf reports, like whenever there were storms coming through, I would always like, you know, check out like what the wind direction was, what the swell direction was, and like I kind of got to know like which spots in Jersey would be good based on like all those different factors, and kind of like I would say like got into the community, like definitely community of photographers and like a little bit in the community of surfers, and like but I love what you said. Like if I could make money doing that, like I'd probably be doing that right now
Mm-hmm.
because there's like you sound very much like me, just like love the beach, love that coastal vibe, like love being there all the time. There was something about like standing on the beach for like hours at a time, even when it was like freezing fucking cold, that like I didn't care, like I didn't mind, like
Mm-hmm.
I could just be there and do that like all day. But like I'd be out for like 2 or 3 hours shooting surf. I might get one photo picked up in like a digital gallery for like $10,
Yeah.
which, but like when I was a little bit younger, I didn't have kids and I didn't, and I didn't have to worry about like all these other things. I mean, I was like stoked, like I would be like super excited if I would get like if like Surfline or like Eastern Surf Mag, which I don't even know if it exists anymore, like they would pick up like, those photos and include them in like a swell gallery. Um, yeah, that's just really funny. I had no idea you did
Yeah,
surf photography.
I can't
Yep.
believe we never talked about that. I feel like because we're always talking about weddings and we can talk about weddings for like hours and hours. And
I know.
so that's what we
Yeah.
like gravitate towards on wedding days. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it's so fun. It's so fun shooting surfing. And like, yeah, when your photos get on like something, it's like the biggest honor. I remember when I was in Hawaii the first time, or not the first time, but when I was a sophomore, WSL posted a few of my photos and I was like, oh my God, this is like
you've made
the
it.
dream. Yeah, I was like, I made it, even though they don't pay people to post, or at the time, they did not pay me. I also didn't demand a payment from them to post it on
You
like their
probably should have.
Instagram and stuff, but I was like, just the clout of them posting my name at the time, I was like, that's good for now. I mean, I don't, looking back, I'm like, I probably should have asked them to pay me, but also,
Yeah.
whatever.
I have an Instagram account that's like basically just kind of it's not doing anything. I mean, at one time it was very active, but I have like a whole account with like all of my nature and surf stuff. That like I just with kiddos and weddings and like
Mhm.
everything else going on right now, like I'm lucky if I get out once a year, to do any kind of surf photography. It's because my kids don't care, like
Yeah,
they go out to the beach and they're like it's cold, like let's
right.
go home. Although I did get my oldest son, we did a surf camp with him last year, and he like loved it. He was like all about it, has like no fear.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm hoping. I don't know. I might have to pick up like a longboard and wetsuit for myself this summer so that I can like get in the water with him. Um, I've also always had like I really admire the photographers who get in the water with like the waterproof housings and stuff. Like I think those shots are so freaking cool.
Hmm.
Like early on when I was like first getting into this, I met Clark Little.
Oh wow, yeah, he's amazing.
He was doing a tour around the U.S. with like this new documentary that he was doing, um, and like it was like they showed the documentary and they had like all this footage of him just like throwing himself into this like gnarly shore break on the North Shore. Um, and I was like, that's fucking cool. Like
Yeah.
that's this like and like everyone knows who he is at this point. Like it's not really like a new thing, but I was just like, wow, like here's a guy who like had an idea of something he wanted to do. He wasn't doing like what everyone else was doing. Like everyone else, like you and me, we'd be on the beach at Pipeline, like shooting surfers. But he went down the road a couple miles to like Waimea and like these
Yeah.
other like kind of smaller beaches and was like throwing himself into these giant shore break waves. And I think about that all the time, like with my own photography, right? Like there's things that like everyone else is doing, which are cool and like exciting and fun, right? But like, what is like my secret sauce? Like what is
Hmm.
my like, what are the things that like I'm bringing to the table that like other people may not be? And the other thing you said too about like being kind of that like all in one like marketing house for companies, like, and people not understanding that, like, that's really cool. The fact that you were like, I'm doing this thing, and like people didn't get it though. So like, did people eventually start to get it? Did companies eventually start to get it?
I think that some did, but I honestly think that the influencer industry blowing up in the way that it did made it actually even more confusing because then there are certain influencers or content creators that were producing photography that was incredible. Like
Mm.
some stuff is shot on an iPhone and it's more casual, and especially like now the influencer content that we see, a lot of it is casual because that's what like people are gravitating towards. Like, consumers and followers are gravitating towards typical everyday relatable UGC content. But
What is
even like
UGC?
what?
UGC?
Oh,
What is
user generated content.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
that was a term that I learned at Beholden, which is like you have these professional photos, that's one option for content, and then you have real weddings, and that's another form of content that we would share. And then you have UGC, user generated content, where we would send a dress to an influencer or a content creator and they would go and shoot it at in a cool space or wherever. So just another type or just like a different category of content. But now I think most, at least the media that I'm seeing and consuming, most brands want user generated content because that's what consumers really relate to and it
Mm.
really is driving sales right now. But back in like 2018, that was kind of when Instagram was like really at its peak. And there were influencers that their whole thing was flying around the world and getting the most insane photo of them like on a cliff in a dress. And that
Mm.
was like, that was what Instagram was. That would like break the internet at the time. And influencers were doing that. And so I feel like that made it even more confusing that I was like, I don't want you to base my skill off of how many followers I have because I never had this like huge following.
Right.
But I
Well,
think they
because
would
that's not what
look
you're
at
doing. Like you're not. That's not what you like. You're not going to post the photos. Like it was for
exactly.
them. Yeah.
Exactly. And I wonder if some of them were like, well, we can hire an influencer to do it almost as good as you. And they also have 10,000 followers. So why would we not just pick them? It was kind of
Right.
like a battle. I mean, some companies did work with me. Like I did have quite a few brands under my or in my portfolio for photography, but it's one of those things where you reach out to 100 and maybe three of them say yes. Like maybe
Mm.
10 of them answer and maybe three of them say yes. Maybe one of them says yes. So I got very used to sending tons of inquiry emails, cold emails, and getting no for an answer or getting no response, which I think was good for me because that's how a lot of things in the creative freelancing space are. Um, but yeah,
So
that was, I do think
I'm
it remained confusing for a long
I'm
time.
very impressed with your persistence. Um, so as a freelance, so that's actually one of the other things I want to talk to you about. So like as a freelancer, do you you value having that like flexibility over like being like caught up in that 9 to 5? Because I the other thing you said before that I wanted to get back to was I also kind of had that experience of like I didn't think that there was another route to go. That wasn't going to be like me in an office or like me, you know, as a teacher in a school. Like I didn't see like another route that like wasn't, this wake up, get ready for work, go to work, come home, da 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 da. And fortunately for me, like, so I did major in business also, and I wound up getting a marketing degree, and like I think what I realized like pretty early on, and like life kind of threw some circumstances at me too that kind of forced me into where I'm at today. But I did the 9 to 5 thing for a little bit, and like I it, I just lacked the self awareness that I think like other people had to say like this isn't for me, and but at the same time I kind of knew like intuitively or subconsciously that like this is just soul crushing and this is not like sustainable for me.
Hmm.
And so like little by little like my life started to kind of push me in the direction of not even photography necessarily, but like something more flexible, right? Like I need to like for my personality, for like my makeup, like I need to be doing something different every single day, right? It needs to like look a little bit different every single day. And like that's one of the beauties of weddings is like there's like enough there within the wedding that there's like some familiarity, right? And there's like some things that
Hmm.
are kind of like consistent across all weddings, but like every day is a little bit different, right? Like every relationship's a little bit different, every couple's a little bit different, every family dynamic's a little bit different, every venue's a little bit different. So like the freelancing worked actually I feel like for me worked out really, really well because my days are free for the most part to like do stuff that like I want to do, and then on the weekends I get to like have this experience of like photographing, beautiful weddings for really great people. And then like the back end work is like, all right, I'm kind of done with this now. Like you take over. So like,
Yeah.
do you feel like at some point maybe you're gonna develop more of your own wedding brand, or do you think you're gonna stick with like freelancing for now? Like, what do you think?
So when I first started shooting weddings, I obviously started from assisting and then second shooting for somebody else. And then they did offer me the idea of associate shooting. And I was also shooting weddings on my own. I had the whole like Kelee Bovelle weddings brand. I had an Instagram website. It was separate from my commercial photography, like tropical shooting products website. And I liked it for a while. Like it was like, I'm gonna do this. It's my goal. Like I love doing this. I'm gonna be an amazing wedding photographer, and that's gonna be my brand. And then at some point, I don't know what it was. I just was like, actually, no. Actually, I don't want to do this as my full brand. I feel like I'm a multi-hyphenate. And I really believe that. And I don't think that doing one thing and nothing else will ever be fulfilling for me. And I think that when it comes to wedding photography, you want a client that really cares about it, wants to hire a wedding photographer. That's the only thing they do. That is their specialty. And that's what they want. And that's what they're going to pay a lot of money for. And a brand is not going to hire a wedding photographer because I actually think that our studio, and now it is kind of changing, we do a good job of kind of bridging the gap between like shooting a little bit of editorial, we shoot a little bit of fashion, like we do shoot documentary style photography at weddings and just capture things exactly how they're happening. But then we also do shoot portraits. We also do set up these like really perfect, like beautiful settings where we put the bride and we like style the dress and everything like that. So I think we are a really good example of like we do have a lot of different skills on a wedding day. But I think back in the day, like even before I was a wedding photographer, and these are not even my words. I did a business mastermind in like 2020, and the person that was teaching the class said this: a brand doesn't want a wedding photographer because it's a different skill set. A
Mm-hmm.
brand wants a commercial photographer that's going to focus on details and really understand what it takes to shoot a product. And that is way different than what it takes to shoot a wedding. And I think that I had both because one, I just think I just have a very detailed brain. It's probably becoming clear with the amount of details I am not leaving out. I'm telling you literally everything that's ever happened to me in my life. But just a very detailed brain, and the fact that I worked at a corporate brand, fashion brand with products, that it was very important to get like all sides of them. And then in the surf world, I feel like it's something that I learned is you need to get the sponsor. So if someone does like a sick like bottom turn, but you can't see the sponsor's logo on their board, they're not going to use that picture. So I feel like I was learning it from both sides, and that's kind of irrelevant to what I was getting at. But when I'm thinking about being a wedding photographer, I just realized that if the only thing that I was and my only brand was wedding photographer, I don't think I would be fulfilled, because it very much kind of puts you in a box, or at least that's how I viewed it at the time. I'm sure now there are a million people that are amazing wedding photographers and they also have other brands, but at the time that's how I saw it.
Mm.
And so I wanted to separate it. So then I started pursuing associate shooting, which I think confuses a lot of people, but I actually just heard someone describe it as white labeling yourself. And I was like, wow, that's actually a really good way to put it. So basically, I am now I chose to just start white labeling myself when it comes to photo, and I don't do video for brands really, but when it comes to photography, and I even do still shoot for certain brands. Like last week, I was in New York shooting for one of the urban brands. It was an event that they were putting on for a grand opening, and sorry, I just hit my mic. And I just showed up. They paid me a certain amount of money. I showed up, I edited the photos, and I gave them back to them. And now, like, they posted on their Instagram my photos, and the brands that they partnered with, my photos are on their Instagrams as well, but I'm not tagged in it. I'm not
Right.
like, but, and like, I don't care, honestly. Like, I just feel like I lost the, like, I want to be known for this. Like, I'm like, if you're paying me a rate that I feel is valuable for the work that I'm doing and compensates me well, I don't care if I'm white labeled or not. And I think that that's okay for me right now, because I think that that gives me a lot of flexibility to make my personal brand something else. And
Mm.
I'm currently loving that, because while I love shooting weddings, I also love making content and making vlogs. And I think that right now how I have it is really good for me, because I also don't love dealing with all the contracts. I don't love editing every photo that like maybe the lighting wasn't perfect and I'm like struggling to like make it look perfect. So now that I'm white labeling myself and I'm shooting weddings for a studio as an associate, I get all the benefits of being a wedding photographer with like none of the like negative parts, I
Yeah.
guess, because I don't have to do contracts. I don't have to make sure everyone's paying me on time. I show up and I'm creative and I'm so passionate about it on the day of. And then I can go home, and on Monday, I can be so passionate about my vlog that I made like last week that I'm now editing, or I can be passionate about my podcast episode that I'm filming this week.
Yeah. Yeah. So I it's really funny you mentioned that, because I also, one of the things I didn't love about surf photography, and it's not like specific to surf photography, this is like more of a me thing, but like I would get a shot that I thought was like epic, sick, and if if I wasn't going to submit it to one of the publications, I would post it. Um, but then it like wouldn't get as many like likes as I thought it should, and I would get like so bent out of shape over stuff like that. And or if I did submit it, or if I did tag like the sponsor or like one of the publications, but like someone else got like a slightly better shot, and like that was the one that got like picked up, I would get like, I used to get so bent out of shape over stuff like that. And you mentioned like these brands now posting your photos, like, and you're not getting like credit, quote unquote, but like you you can't pay your bills with credit. Like you can't pay
Right.
your bills with like getting retagged or whatever. Like that's like something I had to learn too, was what do I want? Like, do I want some notoriety? Do I want my ego fed, or do I want to do the part of it that's like fun? Like for me, and again, right, wrong, or indifferent, like my personality is based on like I want to be doing like what's enjoyable. I want to be doing like what's fun for me. Um, and what I started to realize, like especially within the photography space, the thing that I loved the most about photography was like getting to be around the people, you know, getting to be around like other creative minds, or like on the wedding front, like getting to have, you know, a front row seat to something that's like really special to someone else, you know? Um, so I like kind of found a way to make it work for me too, in that, um, you know, I'm getting to be there doing the fun part. Oh, and this is the other thing I wanted to say about like business. Like, I came out of school with a business degree. Like, I have a marketing and a management degree, um, and I question very often whether or not it actually helps me with like my own business, because like a lot of the stuff that I learned in business school, like I feel like was preparing me to be like, um, I don't know, an employee at like a big company. You know, it wasn't like, and maybe if I had taken more like entrepreneurship classes, like it would have been more like applicable to like what I'm doing now. But like so much of what I learned was like a lot of theory about like big business and like mergers and acquisitions, and like, you know, case studies on like Starbucks and how they like expanded like so rapidly. Like I probably read like a dozen, you know, case studies about Starbucks, which
Hmm.
whatever, they're fine. But like like none of that is applicable to like a small business owner like running a small business. And like I also don't love, you know, doing like the financials. I don't love marketing myself. I don't love, um you know, I can deal with a certain amount of like editing on the back end, but for the most part, like I just don't want to be, really what I don't want to be doing is like sitting in front of my computer, um, by myself. You know, like I need to go to like a coffee shop. I need to be like around people. Like that just kind of ignites my, um, you know, energy, creativity. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Um, so the freelancing thing has worked for me too, in that I don't have to do any of that stuff. But what I'm starting to like realize is like, and I've talked, I think I've talked to you about this. Like I'm working on like a rebrand for my photography business, um, that's going to be like a little bit more like all encompassing of like all the other interests that I have too. Um, and it's definitely leaning more into like the coastal element. Um, so like I'm really excited about that, and I'm really excited to like share that with people, and I'm like still have that in the works. Um, but I find it interesting that like you started off that way. Oh, and the other thing you said, I'm curious to get your perspective on this because I have a theory. You've mentioned the word goals a couple of times. So, like, I am going to say something that might be like borderline controversial, but like, I don't like goals. I don't really believe in them, honestly. I,
Fair.
and that's just for me. Like, I just don't think that they work for me because I will set a goal for myself, and I'll get like very attached to that goal, and I feel like I get tunnel vision and I lose like the forest for the trees. Do you
Okay.
feel similarly, or do you like what's your take on that?
Not exactly, but I do think that I feel like I want you to dive deeper on the actually first before I say my thought, dive deeper on that. What do you mean that you lose sight? Can you give us an example and like what was the spot that you lost sight on it?
Um so I, of course, now I can't think of like a specific
Yeah.
example,
Okay.
but you know, the issue that I constantly have is like, all right, I'll set a goal for myself. Let's say I want to book like 10 weddings for myself in a year, right? Like I'll do all the things that I think I'm supposed to do in order to like make that happen. And I'll give it like an ample amount of time, in order for that to happen, or to like start getting bookings. And if I see that it's not happening, then I start to get like frustrated. I start to get like down on myself. And I start to feel like, you know, what's wrong, right? And I
Hmm.
think what I've noticed in my own life is that, and again, this is like maybe just a me thing. Um, a lot of times, like the thing that I think I'm supposed to be doing, or the thing that I think I'm supposed to be focusing on, um, I like the universe actually has like a better plan for me, or like the universe actually has like a bigger um, path laid out for me. Um, I feel like it's happened so many times where like I'll use the example of college, right? Like I went to school for business. I thought I was gonna be, like Mr. 9 to 5, like, getting paid a good salary with like good benefits. And I don't know what I thought I don't know what I thought, honestly. I don't know like what that vision was, but it's not where I am now. Um, and I was talking about that lack of like self awareness before, right? Like I didn't know that like the thing that I was doing, I wasn't really doing it for me, right? Like I was doing it to like look good on the outside. I was doing it to like create this perception of like, hey, look, Mike, he's doing all the things that he's supposed to be doing. He's doing like went to high school, he like played the sports, and now he's in college and he's like getting the business degree. Um, and eventually I wound up getting laid off from the job that I had after college. Um, Laid off. I got fired. I keep in my mind. I keep saying like laid off when in reality they like very gently fired me. They were like,
Oh,
"You're
wow.
like not a good fit for this." But they like were very good to me. They gave me like a lot of time to like try to get my feet underneath me before I was actually like fired. Um, but I was like unemployed for a year and a half, being like, "Hey, I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do. Like, what the fuck?" Like
Hmm.
I did all the stuff that you're quote unquote supposed to do, and now here I am at like 23, 24, unemployed. Granted, the economy kind of sucked at the time. This was like 2008, 2009. But like, yeah, it was like very confusing and disillusioning. And so all that to say that like I have a track record of thinking like I should be like I'm supposed to be doing this, when in reality like there's another path that's like, no, Mike, like trust me, like trust the universe, like trust your intuition. Um, so I think like that's my issue with goals, is like anytime I've set them, I've usually been like wrong about where I should be putting my focus, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think how I used to see goals were this like huge idea that describes like everything you want in your life, and you have to write the goal of like yeah, exactly that. This all-encompassing thing. And I also failed at a lot of them because part of my issue when I was just starting my career as a freelance creative was I know the general idea of what I want, but what is the work that I actually have to do to achieve it? And I think it can be really hard for people like us that do have so many different passions, and we don't crave this like one job where you're like you start as an assistant, then you get to the associate level, then you get to the manager level and whatever. So that can be like clearly mapped out. For us, it's so much harder because you don't even know. Like, I'm like, but what do I have to do when I wake up on Tuesday to get closer to the job? Like, I actually do not know that. And I really did struggle with that for a long time. And so I think more recently, I now look at goals as more of these smaller things that I can more easily map out the route to. So instead of saying, like, obviously I have a goal in life to be financially free, to be able to make whatever decisions I want, to be able to say no to certain jobs and not feel like I'm losing money on them. There's these overarching goals, but how I see goals in my daily life now is I am writing like in February, I want to do, or it's March now. In March, I want to do like these things, whether it is like open like another investing account or reach out to 5 people to collaborate on X project or start this project over here or experiment with this thing that I have been putting off forever. So in my life currently, I am definitely focusing on these smaller goals that if someone who was like a really high functioning person and like the most successful business person looked at them, they'd be like, these aren't goals, these are just daily tasks. But for me, I'm like, I have to look at it as a goal. And those are the things that are probably going to get me closer to what I want to do. And if they don't, then it's going to be a good lesson to learn. So I do think that there is like multiple it's almost like semantics. Like you can
Yeah.
call it a goal or you could call it just like the things that I have to do in my daily life. And you could call it a goal or you could call it like what I want in life overall. And there's everything in between. But I do
Yeah.
think there's a lot of pressure on it because I also think that if you tell someone your goal, like goals change all the time. At least they do for me. If you asked me when I was graduating college, if you could just stop everything else and get paid good money to travel the world with pro surfers and photograph them at every surf break in the world, do you want to do it? I'd be like, yes, 100%. That is my number one goal in life. That changed so quickly, and it wasn't because of anything negative that happened. It wasn't because I realized that I'll never be able to do it. Like, I actually do think I could have done it if I really, really wanted to. But then I was like, oh, wait, but I like shooting weddings too. And so I don't want to completely give that up. And I also love shooting content. Like, something that I really, I feel like this is a good example of how like my goal transitioned. So when I first started shooting products, I would use my friends or my sister to model for me. My sister was a pretty good model. And I would kind of like direct her, but no one that I was using as my models for these product shoots were professional models. It was me telling them exactly where to stand and what to do. And sometimes I had a vision in my head that I was describing to them, and they weren't posing in the exact way that I wanted them to. They weren't holding it exactly how I wanted them to. And so I would say, okay, wait, I will do it. You hold the camera, and I set all the camera settings. I'm like, hold it right here, click onto this to focus onto the product, and I'll do the pose. And then I just think that that happens like more and more often as I was shooting more and more products. And then I learned to really like doing that. And I was like, oh, I like directing and also being in the photos. I like doing all of this. And I'm like, wait, so I realized that I really like directing. And something that I learned on a huge shoot at the corporate job that I had was a lot of the times, maybe it's not a lot of the times, but on some of the shoots that I witnessed, there would be a photographer, and the only thing they did was snap the photo, was click the
Mm,
camera, was stand there and click the camera. There was an art director, there was a director over here, creative director, saying, like, telling the model where to go, where to hold her hand, where to do all of this. And I was like, actually, that's what I am drawn towards. Like, I would love to do that. And someone else can click the camera. And that was kind of what I was doing when I was like, I'll actually set the entire thing up and my friend just has to click the camera. And the photo is like exactly what I wanted it to be. And
but like as
when
a
I,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but like
yeah, it's
don't you
okay.
feel like if you were the photographer in that situation, like that's just like so boring. You know, like part of the fun of like being the photographer is also like being the creative director and
Yeah.
like being, like in control
Yeah.
essentially, you know?
And I think they do have like I feel like I'm diminishing it a little
Right.
bit, but like the basics are there to shoot. And if the creative director says something else, like maybe they could give feedback, but for the most part, like on certain shoots, the creative director is the person. It's almost like on a movie set or a TV set, like the director is making the choices. Yes, the
Right.
camera people could probably give them feedback and being like, actually, it doesn't look good with that lighting, but the director is the one
Right.
that has the final say, you
So it's
know?
more based on like a hierarchy than like, you know, yeah, I get that. I want to back up for a second though,
Okay.
because I think like something you said, right? So I do agree that also like with goals, it is kind of like a word game. It is kind of like a semantic game. It's like whatever value we've assigned that word in our brain. But I think like what's been really helpful for me with that whole thing is like kind of like taking a step back and almost looking at it like more broadly, like not so much like what specifically like the specific I gave was like I want to book 10 weddings. Okay, fine, but like more broadly, like I want to live in a way where I have like flexibility, I have like freedom to
Hmm.
travel, and my family my family's like safety and financial security is like taken care of, right? So like if I think of it, in terms of like those are my core values, right? Like those are the things that I really and I want to be fulfilled, right? And I want to be like creatively fulfilled. So like I think for me, kind of like taking a step back and starting there, and then maybe like coming up with, like you said, those like little smaller incremental things that I need to do on like a day to day basis. Like that's been a healthier way to look at it for me. And maybe that is like, you know, goal setting in a way, it's just not the way that I've been like conditioned to think of it. Um, but that's kind of like where I've landed on all that is like, and that's why like the freelancing historically has worked very well for me because it's, I, like you said, I can like say no to things that I want to say no to, and I can say yes to things that I want to say yes to, and, work for the people that are going to treat me really, really well and pay me really, really well. And I can like prioritize that. But I wanted to stop you there for a second, but I also want you to keep going on that like creative director piece because I'm like really curious about that.
Yeah, well, I think the point that I was getting at in my long-winded like explanation was I kind of learned that my goal changed. And so I was saying how if you asked me when I was a senior in college if you want to travel the world being a surf photographer, I would have said yes. But then as I was going down my career path, I was like, actually, no, like that would be amazing. Like that would be a great career, but that's not what I want to do forever. And now at this point, if you offered me that, I'd be like, once again, sounds amazing. Maybe I would love to do it for like a month or two per year or something. I would like to have one shoot and do that. But no, that's not what I want to do. It's not my goal in life to be a surf photographer. So then I feel like you look at something like that and you could be like, oh, I failed in that. Like, I never achieved that goal. No, my goal changed. Like, and it's not because I failed. It's just because we are ever evolving people. And to your point about, these bigger goals of like, this is what I want for my family. This is like the financial freedom I want. I think for myself, I'm really into rewarding yourself in these little things. And that's how you're going to feel fulfilled in the everyday and be happy with what you're doing every day. So if I had a goal for myself, for example, to make X amount of money in a year and be able to book a vacation and not even look at the price tag, like just some random example, it's going to take me a while to do that. Like and also because I never had a corporate like full-time job. I never made a consistent amount of money. Like thankfully every year I kind of make like more and more as my business like solidifies more, but I'm still not there. Like I cannot go and book a vacation or like buy my mom a car, even though I would love to do that just like willy-nilly and not think about it. So if that's like the goal that I'm searching for in my daily life, for myself at least, I'm going to be more let down because I'm like, damn, I still didn't book the vacation without the price tag. I still didn't buy my mom the car, even though look at all the things you're achieving on a daily basis that are valuable and they're also goals of yours. And while you have these overarching goals, like it's also okay to celebrate smaller goals. And I feel like that's something that I've been focusing more on recently. And I said rewarding yourself for these smaller goals, even if rewarding yourself is checking it off
Mhm.
and off your like whiteboard to-do list and being like, yes, like I did it. Something I'm doing this year is I'm keeping a note on my phone for monthly goals, and I am just like checking them off on the iPhone like checkbox feature as I do them so that I can look back on this year and be like, I did do these things that I said I
Yeah.
was going to do. And I did hold myself to most of them. Maybe
Yeah.
not all of them. There's definitely going to be things that I don't actually get to, but for the most
So
part.
I appreciate like what you said about um changing goals or like priorities changing too. And I think I don't know, this is like really kind of speculating, but I feel like my generation, maybe caught like the tail end of um like you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to, have like a happy life, and you can
Mm-hmm.
retire at 65, and then like you can enjoy your life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that story or that, societal norm has been kind of like over time, like people don't believe that anymore, or people like don't see the value in that anymore. And I think that's really really good. And you know, my wife, or like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, left her teaching job, like a very stable job. You know, good benefits, good salary. Like, you know, my wife has a master's degree, you know, and she taught for, I think, like 10 years. And, you know, when we were having our kids and like starting our family, she was like, you know, I just, she just wasn't resonating with the job anymore. And she kind of felt like, you know, she wanted to spend that time at home with our kids. And, you know, so, and I was in a place where like we were able to swing it, or our family was in a place where we were able to swing it. So like, you know, she got to do that and, you know, spend that time at home. And now that our kids are getting like a little bit older, she kind of like completely switched gears, and now she's like starting her own business and, you know, doing it in a way that's like very flexible, you know, for her, for both of us. So now we're both in this like, you know, small business owner kind of like flexible schedule life, which is amazing. And I guess like what I'm trying to say is like, I feel like the like younger generations are kind of understanding that like it doesn't, like you can be a multi hyphenate and you can like diversify yourself, really. Like you can have diverse interests. You don't have to be locked into like doing one thing and sticking with that thing your entire life. And I think that was like a perception that I had that was like really like detrimental. And I'm, you know, just understanding now, like, you know, I'm not someone who like plans for the long term. I'm not someone who like thinks about, you know, 10, 20, 30 years ahead. Maybe I should. I probably should. I just, whatever, for whatever reason, I just don't. Like, I'm very, like, I want to do what I enjoy now.
Hmm.
Um, but I also am starting to realize, like, I'm not going to be able to shoot 70 weddings a year when I'm like 60. So, you know, eventually, like, something's going to have to give, right? And, um, you know, I had suspected for a long time that I wanted to talk to people like my peers in this industry, and hear like what they had to say. And, you know, when I remember when I think I talked to you about this like over the winter, like I've had this like seed of an idea for like a really really long time, and I've had like a lot of like little seeds of ideas for like a really long time, and I wasn't ready to like pull the trigger on this until I was ready, you know, until like it was like ready to be brought out into the world. And I'm glad that I did wait, because I feel like I've started a lot of things. I'm very good at starting things. I'm not good at like following through and like
Me
sticking
too.
to something. So,
Yeah.
like what in your life do you are like some of the things that have like stuck with you? Like, and what are some things that you maybe want to like start in the future?
Well, being creative in general has always been important to me, and it comes very natural to me. And I think there are so many ways that I can be creative and make money. And I think that's a benefit to me. Kind of what you said, I also agree with you. That is also something that not scared me about the wedding industry, but it was more of just a literal realization that yeah, you cannot shoot a million weddings until you're 65 and you retire. Nor do I think most people want to do that. I don't think that most people will continue to want to do that. And I think most people in, or at least the people that I surround myself with in the industry, they want to shoot less every year, but just make a little bit more money on the projects that they do take and be more intentional in what they do take. So that was part of the reason why I was like, I don't want to just be a wedding photographer and have that be my only thing. Um, I do love photography, but at this point, I kind of what I was saying earlier about the directing, I think that really, really excites me. So there's a million things, there's so many jobs that um, need directors, creative directors, literal directors. So I think that's cool. And that stuck with me for a while. Like I've always loved, ever since I started photography and shooting products and stuff, I've loved the direction part of it. Even on wedding days, like one of my favorite parts is directing things. And I think that that makes me a really good wedding photographer. Um, so I love that. And then I've been loving doing the podcast recently, and I have always loved making YouTube videos. And a podcast is basically just the same thing as a YouTube video. If you get down to the bare bones of it, it's somebody talking to a camera, and like really what's the difference between the two of them? Maybe the length or maybe just how you market it. I love making content. I love talking to a camera. I love talking to people and just being creative.
Do you
And I,
think the talking to the camera, because this is something that I struggle with. I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is
no, it's
something
okay.
that I like really struggle with is like, showing up for, my own business. Like,
Hmm.
do you think that's like just built into your personality? Like, do you think if you were born like, you know, maybe like 50 years ago, like let's say you were like 50 years older, do you think you'd be like this 80-year-old like influencer, like like brunch with Babs? Like, do you think like you'd be
Yeah.
still be doing this?
Um, kind of. I do. I kind of think I have always been drawn to making videos. And even when, like, my first example was like begging my dad to like use his camera to film the ducks at Disney World. I specifically remember that, and we probably have hours of content of the ducks swimming in the pond at the Magic Kingdom. And I just loved making videos, and I feel like at the time I didn't know what that meant.
Mm,
And I was probably in like grade school when YouTube was invented, and then when it started to become more popular, it was back when people didn't really understand how posting videos of yourself would affect your life. And there was a lot of danger that people saw in it. And there is a danger in it still. But I think at the time it was really, really unclear how to protect yourself and what could happen if you post videos of yourself. So even when I was in eighth grade and high school, I wanted to be a YouTuber. Like in my brain, I never told anyone that because it was like kind of embarrassing at the time. I really wanted to be a YouTuber, but my mom basically didn't let me. She did not want me to post videos of myself anywhere because it was dangerous. And therefore I didn't. But it was always in the back of my mind. And I am glad that she did that. And she kind of feels bad about it right now because she's like, if I just let you did that, like you could have, or if I just let you do that, if I let you do that at the time, you could have like already had your career. And I'm like, it's not your fault. Like nothing is, you can't go back and change it. You were trying to protect your child who was what, 13 and didn't have a clue. Like my mom did everything right.
yeah.
But I do think it's funny to think back and be like, yeah, like I did always have this desire. And when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and and my friend's mom, I specifically remember in high school, like my friend and her mom would always be like, oh, you could do this, like you could do this. We went to like an amusement park, and they have the like graphic map of like of the park, and they're like, you could be the designer of these maps. And I'm like, yeah, like that would be cool. Like everyone was like trying to help me figure out what I wanted to do, but just in the back of my mind I'm like, being a YouTuber would be so cool though, like making vlogs and just like I think also who I am to my core, and this is one of the reasons why I love being a freelancer, very similar to what you said. I want to be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, and I don't want to give someone a reason. I want to be able to work today or not work today, and the only reason is I don't want to or I don't feel like it, and I don't want to have to give someone a reason for me to like do a certain job or not do a job. I just want to have the freedom to make my own decisions and not like report to someone. I want to pick my own schedule. I love having freedom.
Mm,
And sometimes that does come with consequences because, yes, if I got a corporate job, I wouldn't have to worry about like picking my own health insurance or, oh shit, did I like file my taxes correctly? Like, I just realized in March that I didn't ask my subcontractors last year for the W-9s. I'm like, oh, shoot, I was supposed to send that by January 28th. I just sent it yesterday. Thankfully, they didn't file their taxes yet. But I'm like, I yeah, there are things that are harder about this job, but at the same time, like I just love having freedom and the freedom to be whatever I want and do whatever I want and basically pick my job. One of the things that I'm manifesting right now is I don't want to lock myself into, I want to be a podcaster forever. I want to be a YouTuber forever. I just want to be able to do whatever I want to do in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I am, one of my current manifestations is I have endless career opportunities that excite me. So
I love
whatever
that.
excites me today, that's what I have endless opportunities to do.
I love
So
that.
I think honestly that is like the root of what has been consistent, like creativity and literally doing whatever I want whenever I want is like
Yeah.
those are the two things that are the most important to me. And also money. I feel like that's something that's looked down upon. I am very money driven, and it's not because I want to like drive a cool car and have all the like bags. Like, I mean, that's kind of cool too in a way. Like, I also love fashion and I don't care about like cars or like whatever, but I am money driven because I think that money is a tool that helps you achieve freedom in many situations. So I I want to make a lot of money
Yeah.
and I want to use it to help myself and to help people.
At the end of the day, you know, like you said, freedom, freedom of your time, freedom of, where you want to invest your energy. Like really, I've come to look at money as really, it's just an exchange of energy, right?
Yeah.
So like, that is the medium that our society has like chosen to, be our exchange of energy, right? Like I'll give you this amount of time or this amount of money for your time, right? But like it's just energy for energy.
Right.
So and like, even with people, I some of the branding shoots that I do all the time, like I'll be like, hey, do you want to barter? Like if it's something that I have like an interest in, like I'm totally like open to that sort of exchange. But like getting back to something you said before about like, your parents, being like, oh, you could make like the signs at the park. Like it sounds like you came from a place or like a family that was like pretty supportive of like, maybe not going down the traditional 9 to 5 route. Like you had people in your life who were like supportive of you going kind of outside the lines.
Yeah, so that was actually my friend's mom, my best friend in high school. Her mom said that. I remember having that conversation with her. But my parents were always supportive of everything that my sister and I did because, like, we were always just trying new things. And I just have the best parents ever. They really gave me everything. But also, it was like the balance between we're going to give you literally everything, but also you have to work. They just did a great job. And so I am so thankful for them when it got to the point like college was always like you're going to college, like it was like not an option. And when my like free spirit soul was a senior in high school and I was like, what if I don't go to college? They were like, if you don't go to college the day after high school graduation, full-time job, those are the
Mm,
options because like you're not doing. And this was one thing they said you're not doing a gap year, and they didn't really entertain that idea. I think if I really went to them and like sat them down and I was like, this is my plan, and it included a gap year, maybe they would have supported it. But they were like, you're getting a job the
yeah.
second you graduate high school, or you're going to college and then you're getting a job. So they were very much like, you need to work.
Yeah.
So while they gave me a million experiences, I was always like, always had a job, always was working. Anyway, when I was getting to the point of choosing my career after graduation, I'm very close with my parents. And so we were always talking about like plans. And also, I lived at home my junior and senior year of college because I went to Temple University in Philly and I grew up like extremely close to the city. It was like a 20-minute train ride. So I was always talking with my parents about my plans or, oh, I just connected with this photographer and this Saturday I'm going to go shadow a wedding photographer. They're like, oh, okay, that's good. And I feel like everyone has heard the phrase weddings pay the bills. Even when I hadn't met photographers, like I have heard people be like, oh, if you want to be a photographer, you have to do that, whatever you're passionate about, and shoot weddings because weddings pay the bills. So my parents knew that there was money in wedding photography. And so when I started expressing interest in shooting weddings, they were very supportive of that. My mom was always a little more reserved in the like saying no to certain work because my parents didn't really grow up with a ton of money. Like money is, you need money to survive in this world. And she, I feel like, was a little more nervous, but I was never, I will say I do work hard and I really do. I don't ask them for anything. So I think if I was like, I'm going to be a freelancer. Also, can I have $10,000 to like support my life for the next year? They would be like, no, like you need to like make a plan. Like you need to make $10,000. So I think because I never really asked them to help me, I was more like in a financial way. Like I lived at home at the time, but I was doing my own thing and I wasn't like, oh shoot, like I can't afford my like groceries. I think if I was saying that, they'd be like, well, what are you doing every day when you're in the office? They
Right.
knew that I was making enough money to support my lifestyle, and I think that made them okay with supporting it. And I also have always had an extremely entrepreneurial side of my brain where I am always thinking about like the next business to start, even if it's just like an idea that I had. And so I pitched a lot of businesses to my dad. A lot of them were about buying real estate and creating like boutique vacation like mini hotels or like something like that. And so I would ask my dad like, oh, we should buy this property and do it together. And my dad's like, that's a really good idea. I'm not going to do it right now. Like, so I'm always, yeah, I was always pitching another idea to my parents. And I think I think it just showed them that if this doesn't work out, there's a million other things that I
Right.
could
Right.
do.
They trust you at this point. Like
Yeah.
they know Free Spirit Kelly is going to be taken care of.
Yeah. But I am really grateful for their support because, like I said earlier, like no one in my life was, or at least that I know of, was a freelancer. Like the closest thing to a freelancer was probably my dad's friend is a realtor, which
Mm.
isn't even the same. Like
Yeah.
he is like a real estate mogul in the
Right.
area and he's like killing it. So it's not even like the same. I didn't know anyone who was a freelancer. In
Yeah.
fact, I remember when I worked at the corporate job, one of the girls who worked there with me, her mom, what both of her parents were freelancers, actually started their. See, I feel like they weren't free. I mean, I guess you could call it freelancing because they didn't work for a company, but they both started their own businesses and worked for themselves. So her mom was an interior designer and just was like, and is so amazing. Like she's like killing it right now. Like they like kind of are, they create really cool content on TikTok and Instagram that gets a lot of views. And I just remember people talking about it with her in the office and she's like, oh, my parents, that was like never even a question, like getting your own health insurance, like you can do it, it's not that hard. It
Mm.
sounds scary, but then if you actually want to do it, you'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
And that was at the time where I didn't have that yet. Like I was still in school, so I was on my parents' health insurance, and I'm like, oh, like the day I have to get my own health insurance, like God help me. And then
Yeah.
I was like, oh wait, you literally just log on and you just get it. Like it's really like we can do it. Like people can do the job that we're doing. It's not that crazy to
Yeah.
not work for somebody else. You just have to work a little bit. I don't want to say harder, even like you just have to work differently.
Yes. 100%. And I definitely didn't grow up in an environment where and not just like my parents are like wonderful people, and they had jobs that were like pretty conventional. My mom was a teacher, my dad was like an engineer, and worked in corporate and private industry for like a very long time. And but the environment I grew up in, like not just at home but like the people around me, right, was like very much like you go to college and there's like a very definite career path that you like choose from like a very young age,
Hmm.
and you don't necessarily deviate from that. And like if you do, then like something's wrong. And it wasn't until like maybe like recently, like I love the health insurance example. Like you know, aside from like how you feel about the industry in general, like it's you go in the marketplace and you find like health insurance,
Hmm.
and there's ways to getting back to that, like once I kind of decided like where my priorities were, right? Like I wanted my family to be safe and healthy. I want to have freedom to like travel and like do all these things. And I want to do something that fulfills me. once you have that in place, like then you just start making decisions around that, and you
Hmm.
start saying like, okay, I don't want to do a 9 to 5. You know, and I think I said this in the last episode. Like, if I had a 9 to 5 and like, had all of the household responsibilities and like family responsibilities like on top of that, first of all, I don't even know who would be raising my kids, right? Like, I'd be making that money to like send them to a daycare. Um, I'd essentially be working to send them to daycare, right?
Hmm.
When the way it is now, I'm home with them a lot, but I get to spend all this time with them, and it's amazing, and it's hard, but it's amazing, and they're like developing this relationship. We're developing this relationship, based on like all this time that we're getting to spend together. That like, again, through like no fault of their own, like I just didn't have that with my parents. Like they were working and they were like providing for us, and putting us in like a safe home school district, and so I think what's really cool now though is like I see that I don't know that I necessarily have like the entrepreneurial component. I definitely have like the creative and like that, kind of like fiercely independent, like don't tell me what to do. Like if you tell me what to do, I'm going to do the opposite kind of thing. Which my wife, it drives her absolutely crazy. Um, God bless her. But like I, you know, I feel like I've been able to kind of. Oh, so what I was saying, my son, my oldest son, does definitely have, and he's not even 7 yet, but he definitely does have that like entrepreneurial side of him. Like he, is already like he'll go to the beach and we'll fill up like a Home Depot bucket full of like clamshells and like other, cool stuff that we find on the beach. And he like will bring them home, and he's got these like markers and like, you know, these different like metallic drawing things that he uses, and he'll like make designs out of them. And then he'll like take my folding tables and like put them outside on our front lawn and set up like a little store for like
Yeah.
selling his art. And I'm like, dude, you're 6, like, and I think it's amazing. I think it's so cool, and now like he has these parents who like hopefully can be examples to him that like you can follow that passion, right? You can like follow that
Yeah.
little seed of like, I think this is something that I really want to do. And even if for him, even if it's just making money, like cool, like do that, find ways to do that that are like enjoyable for you. And like, I'll say like I love getting to go to the beach with him and like, explore and like look for cool things on the beach and like forage and like find driftwood and like shells and all that kind of stuff. I think it's the coolest. And like getting to come home and then like work with him, and draw with him. Like these are all things that I've been able to like do and spend time with him that he loves doing, and also like, feed that little entrepreneurial spark that he has. And I think like
Yeah.
that's so cool. I don't know what that's going to be for like my other kids yet, but like, maybe they will want to follow a more traditional career path, and like that's totally fine. But, I even though I didn't necessarily, and maybe I did have those people in my life, I just didn't focus on those people. I didn't like, pay attention to those people. Like my priority or my vision or my focus was on something else. But I'm like really glad that my kids have that in me and my wife now, where they can like see, hey, you know, my wife's a lactation counselor now, and she like got really passionate about that after, having our own kids and like having her own struggles with like finding providers and people who were going to be like supportive of that piece. Like she really wanted to have this experience of like breastfeeding our kids, and there were, you know, parts of the, the medical industry or pharmaceutical industry, whatever you want to call it, like that. I don't want to say weren't supportive of that, but like it was very hard for her to find people who were going to support that for her, even when it was more difficult, right? Like, so, now she gets to be that for other people, right? And
Mhm.
for me with like photography, I've heard other people share their like really touching stories of like why they got into photography, wedding photography specifically. You know, I don't know even if I've been able to identify like what my why is, or like what like really drives me with photography or wedding photography, I just know that like I love being around people, and I love being around. Oh, here comes my son.
Wait, who is this?
Yet another podcast. He did this on the last episode too.
Wait, which one is this?
I just know that I love being around people,
Wait,
and I
which son
love.
is this?
Oh, this is Augie.
Oh, Augie. Hi,
Yeah.
Augie.
You want to say hi to Kelly? Say hi.
We went to the beach together one time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Do you remember that? We had the beach day.
He's so cute.
All right, bud. I'm almost done. Give me like 10 more minutes, okay? Or can you be quiet in here while I do this?
I am.
Okay, cool. So like the point I was getting at is like I don't necessarily know if I know, what my motivation is even, but I just know that like anytime I leave a shoot or like a wedding day, like obviously there's exceptions where the day was like really, really challenging, or like, something came up that like wasn't so pleasant, but like the vast majority of like wedding days and shoots I come away from and I'm like, yeah, like that was awesome. Like I feel, even though I may be tired after a wedding day, like there's a, there's like a, I don't know, I'll be still kind of vibrating with like the energy from the day.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
agree. I agree with you too, because I can't think back to like, or I can't really put it into words, like one thing that I'm like, this is why I shoot weddings, other than just I like doing it. It's fun for me and I am passionate about it while I do it. But I do remember that the first time I ever shot at a wedding, I loved it. And they were basically like, if like the first wedding you do, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. And if you love it, then you can do it. But if you hate it, like you're never going to like it. Like it's not going to grow on you, most likely. And so I happened to love it and I just kept doing it. But I do agree with you about like almost every time I leave, like we have the best clients. Like everyone is so sweet. And there are even certain times where if I'm like really tired that day, but I have an engagement session later, I'm like, oh, I have to like get dressed and like go to this beach for this engagement session. Like I'm sitting in traffic, whatever. I'm like, ugh. But then I get there and I meet them and they're like the nicest people ever and they're so excited and I'm like, wait, I love you, like this is so fun. And then I'm like, oh, do this, dude, like let's get into it with the posing, like, oh, what if we did something like extra, what if we did this? And then I leave and I'm like, guys, like I'm so excited to shoot your wedding, like I can't believe I'm not going to see you for like a year or like 6 months until your wedding, like this was so fun, like I can't wait. And then I leave and I'm just like, wow, that was so fun. And I feel guilty for ever being annoyed about the traffic or like having to like get my hair brushed and like get myself together that day, because I'm like they're all just so nice. And I feel like it's I am definitely a people person. I love talking to people and being with people, and I think that it's great. It's so great for that, especially on wedding days too, because we really do just have like the best clients. And I think that like a wedding is so great. Like I feel like whenever I tell people I'm a wedding photographer, people are always like, "Oh, do you have like so many bridezillas? Like are so many people so annoying and like mean to you?" And I'm like, "No. Like they're so happy. This is the best day ever." Like I feel like especially we are at a place where almost every wedding we have is actually so stunning and beautiful, and the client understands that like we're just here to do whatever they want with them and just lead them along the way and just have a good time. And like it doesn't have to be this like perfect like business relationship where we're
Right.
we're so professional, but I'm like, let's go, like we're there together, like we're becoming friends with them, like it's so fun. And the social aspect of it, or like that's a bad word because it is like a job and it's a business, but like being around people is such a benefit and it's so valuable, and that is one of the reasons why I really really love it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It definitely scratches that like social itch for me. And it is so funny that like one of the first questions you get is like, "Oh my God, like the bridezillas, ha 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 ha." Like I don't think I've ever had a bridezilla. I
Oh
don't
my God, no.
And
Yeah.
I've shot like so many like hundreds of weddings, and I'd be hard pressed to find a situation like, where I felt like, "Oh my God, what a bridezilla."
I
Um
know. Me
like
too, actually.
yeah, like it just doesn't, I don't know. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Um
People are happy. I feel like we need to
People are
give people
happy.
more credit. Like people are happier than we give them credit
Right.
for. And not everyone is crazy. Like some people, they do a lot of planning so that they don't have to be crazy on the day of. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
fine.
And not only that, like they're happy. Like, and if there is like any kind of like, I don't even want to say negative emotion, but like let's say like emotion other than like happy or excited, it's usually just like anticipation, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like totally normal. And um, I feel like we also, you know, one of the things that like as wedding photographers we can do is like read a room really really well,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's like really key to like being successful in the job actually. um, and you know what's interesting, you said before like you're either gonna love this or hate this, and like I don't, honestly I don't remember my first wedding like specifically,
Okay.
but I don't remember loving it, but I also don't like. I just my perception of like those early weddings is like I don't remember loving it, but I also don't remember hating it.
Yeah.
I just remember feeling like, and maybe it was because my anxiety was so bad at the time that like I knew there was like something there for me, but I also was like so nervous about it that I couldn't really like be present and enjoy it, like just really
Yeah.
enjoy like what was actually happening.
Do you remember if those times were you assisting or second shooting, or did you kind of jump right in like somebody that you knew asked you to shoot a wedding, like
Yeah, it was
fully
like
shoot it?
someone that I knew asked me to shoot a wedding.
Okay.
And so I was like thrown right into the deep end like pretty quickly, and definitely like felt, I wouldn't have been able to admit this at the time, but I was like totally in over my head.
Yeah.
And if I had the opportunity to like go back and like redo those early weddings, like, you know, hindsight's like always 2020. And it was like something that I did for a friend, and I'm sure they were like totally happy with the photos, and it was fine. But like I look back on those and I'm like, oh my God, like if I got the opportunity to shoot that today, you know, like holy moly, like it would
Yeah.
be so good. Um, but yeah, so I feel like I kind of I threw myself into the deep end, and then I like took a little bit of a step back and was like, all right, maybe let me like second shoot for some people, and then kind of like see where this goes.
Right.
And you know, in the meantime, I was kind of working like part-time jobs here, like retail jobs, and so like it wasn't until like 2020 that I decided to go full time with this and like really like throw myself into it.
Okay.
But like getting back to your points about like just being around like happy people, and like, you know, that was it, like not having to like put on this weird like corporate persona,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like really getting to be yourself, and like really like authenticity I feel like has become so important to me. Like I never want to be in a situation where like I feel like I can't be myself. Like obviously on a wedding day you kind of have to feel the room a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
like decide how much of your like weird or crazy you're gonna let out. But like for the most part I feel like most people on a wedding day, like they are like really wanting that, you know, they want you, like they want that like little reprieve from like whatever pressure or anticipation is there. And so, you know, I love that. That's one of the things I love about it too, is like I get to be like unapologetically who I am, you know, like that goofy, like kind of silly joke making, you know, I don't have to be like stepping on eggshells with like what I'm gonna say. Like obviously,
Daddy,
the,
look it.
that's cool, dude. I love that.
I made an A with one of these pointy things.
That's wonderful. So yeah, I think maybe we could start to wrap this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I completely agree with you what you were saying though about like on wedding days they want you, and I think something that I've noticed on certain wedding days is you get there and they are almost, especially if you haven't had excuse me, especially if you haven't had an engagement session with them, or if you don't have too much rapport prior, some people are almost expecting it to be like a little more formal than it is. And I think that something that we're both good at is going into a room where people are like, there is a lot of energy going on because of anticipation. This is a huge day for them. And when we go in and we're just like, hey, like, what's up? And like, tell me about your day so far. And we're not just like, okay, here we go. Like, let's go. Like, we need to start. I'm just
Daddy,
like,
look it.
yeah,
Whoa.
like you can just give me the details now and I'll do it. And then when everyone's like running around and they're like oh my God, we're running late. We're running 10 minutes late. I'm like, yeah, but like we're fine. Like we're gonna get all the pictures. And like I feel like when you and I start to get nervous is when something's actually going not going
Daddy,
wrong, but
now
like
I
if we're like
need a
really far
different
behind because of
phone.
like something. And then you and I are like, all right, we gotta like,
I
all
know.
right, everybody, let's move a little faster. Like we still keep it like positive, but there
Yeah.
are times where we're like, all right, we got to be a little more on
Yeah.
them. But for the most part, we're just like, guys, we're just having fun. And then I do think, one last point, something that I just started saying to like every couple that I have in engagement shoots and weddings, I'm like, guys, I'm just going to give you every option for every picture. And if I say something to you and you think it is the dumbest pose or the dumbest picture, the most pointless thing, and you don't want to do it, and you're never going to look at the picture in your gallery and you're going to think it's so dumb, please tell me. Please tell me. I will not be offended. If you don't want a picture of you like tying your shoes, like that's fine. You're not going to break my heart. Like it's okay. You can tell me that you think it's dumb. I want to do what you want to do. And I feel like that helps people a lot because they're like, "Oh wait, I'm actually not being forced to do this. Like this is for me." You know, I'm not just like doing whatever she wants to do because she's telling me to. Like if you don't want to do something, like I'm here for that too. So yeah, I do think we just have the best clients though. Like
Yeah.
I love everyone.
I will say one of the things that I've learned from you, and it makes a lot more sense now, like kind of hearing your perspective and like your experience as like a, you know, in like art direction and that sort of thing, is like really, really paying attention to like little details, you know, like hands and like, you know, position, like you, especially during bridal portraits, like you really take the time to like like accentuate little tiny details that I think a lot of people wouldn't notice, you know, like where the hand is in relation to like the veil, or like, you know, where or like the shoelaces. Like I think like that's like a really good example. You know, like most people like wouldn't take a photo of that, but like something that I've learned like more and more is like just keep shooting. Like just keep shooting through all those like little in between moments, and like, you know, later on if it looks awful, like that's fine. We'll call it out. But like
Yeah.
some of those little moments are like my favorite photos, you know, whether it was
Yeah.
just like you know, even if like the camera, if it was an accident, like if the hair just caught like, you know, a hair moving across the face in like a certain way, or like a little, you know, ruffle in the veil a certain way, like those things are things that you can't like. I think art direction is really important, and good art direction will set you up to capture those moments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's we don't have to direct everything. This is kind of how I've been handling getting ready and moments of a wedding day that are more candid. Like they actually have to do this action anyway. I'm like, guys, I'm just going to tell you to stand right here and kind of face your face towards the window so that there's natural light on your face. But then other than that, you can do whatever you want. Like I'm going to remove like all the trash and the water bottles from the background of this like very beautiful corner of the room. But other than that, you can just do what you normally do. So there's like this element of, I am directing you to like stand over there and maybe, you know, turn your face towards the window, towards the light. But like, I don't need to tell you like every single thing, because you're right. Like what you said about the veil blowing in the wind, or like the piece of hair that falls into their face. Like those are the real moments that for the most part, you can't even plan that if you wanted to. And those do make the like beautiful setting even more real.
Yes, it like grounds what's happening. It like grounds
Yeah.
that beauty in something real, you know, because like
Yeah.
I look at, you know, covers of like Vogue magazine, or like, you know, wedding photographers that I mean I love, and even some of the stuff that I post, I'm like, wow, that's really beautiful. But like the stuff that I kind of am drawn to, or the things that like have maybe like a little tiny seemingly imperfect thing, but it like grounds that in like reality, and I think that's like really, really important.
Yeah.
I also love that we like didn't really get into talking about wedding photography
Oh my
until
God,
like
I
the last
know.
like 10 minutes of this thing.
This is actually why I have a podcast, and
Yeah.
probably why you're meant to have a podcast too. Not that I'm like projecting onto you. I
Yeah.
literally talked for like probably 80% of this and like didn't let you get a word in. But I love
It's okay. I
talking.
can
Like
edit it
it's
down.
so fun. It's so fun. Like I just
No,
feel like there's never like with
And
certain people,
Daddy.
you can just talk forever. And I am a consumer of podcasts. Like I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to people talk. I love talking to people. Like so you're just gonna have the best time ever doing this podcast.
I'm really excited. I feel like, these first couple of episodes have been like really, really fun. And um, yeah, I mean, I had, like I said, I had a kind of a rough idea of what I was looking for when I started this, but I also kind of knew that I didn't want to like limit it just to wedding photography because there's
Yeah.
like, a bunch of like wedding photography educators and podcasts out there. And like, I just, I didn't want to be just another like educator or like, I don't know. I really, what I love about this industry and what I love about what I get to do is like, talking to people like, in between the fun stuff of like doing the portraits and like ceremonies and receptions. Like I genuinely love like getting to sit down, with you and like other people and like, if we have like 10 or 15 minutes during cocktail hour or, during dinner is like getting to talk about cool stuff
Yeah.
and like things that like actually are important and things that like actually matter. I despise small talk. I really don't enjoy small talk. Like I really love hearing people's perspective and like getting like backstory on like your life and like where you're coming from and like your influences. Like I just finding the common ground and then also like learning from people. I don't know. I'm excited for this. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I had a really, really good time. I learned a lot. And one more thing I need you to do, because you didn't do it at the beginning. I need you to
Say it
say,
for
my
those
name
of
is,
you who don't.
for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelee Bovelle.
I was thinking that when we were like halfway through, I was like, oh my God, I didn't say that in the way that I should have. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelee Bovelle.
Beautiful.
Was that
Okay.
good? Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you,
having me. This was
Kelee.
so
All right.
fun.
I'll see you soon.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.